Let's do it.
Okay. Like I said, we are going to be doing a first look for DraftKings Week 3. Obviously, have that Fantasy Football Millionaire contest to go through here. Pretty fun contest if you want to shoot for that million. I never really play this contest, but I just wanted to let you guys throw that up there so we can talk about that one today. Maybe we'll talk about roster construction and just general payout structures later on in the stream. But this is going to be a first look for week 3 on DraftKings. Again, Josh and I have never looked at this slate. The idea of this is to come in with a fresh look, a first look glance at things. And then like I said, we have a lot of quarterback news to talk about, so we'll talk about that right away off the bat here. We have Kyler Murray sitting at 8,300. He was one of the highlighted plays that we had yesterday against Jacksonville on the FanDuel first look. If you want to look back at that one, go to RotoRadar-Daily Fantasy Sports on YouTube to find that video. Then we also have Mahomes against the Chargers and Jackson against the Detroit Lions. So let's just table this there. We talked about Murray versus Jackson yesterday, and we saw the ability what Aaron Jones and this Green Bay running back core were able to do. That not necessarily didn't really torch him on the ground that much. They ran the ball a lot and got good enough yards per carry there. So it was encouraging to see that a team was able to run on the Detroit Lions for back-to-back weeks. Now we obviously get the juggernaut running back core in Baltimore taking on Detroit. Josh, do you think that there's any merit here to taking Jackson and saving $500 on Murray, or are these price tags just too close?
Price tags are too close, in my opinion. I understand the upside you get with Lamar, but I think you do, well, I guess you lose out on maybe the 300 passing yards for Lamar, but you probably gain the 100 passing yards bonus from Lamar. I think you could potentially have both with Kyler, though, so I still lean Kyler. Think that the play is amazing against Jacksonville. We've seen this Jags defense get absolutely torched in back-to-back weeks by QBs, and Kyler is better than both of those QBs. So this is an amazing spot for Kyler Murray, and I'm focusing on Kyler this week, at least on the 1 p.m. slate.
Yep. So for me, I mentioned this yesterday. He has back-to-back games with rushing touchdowns, but he hasn't passed that 5 attempt mark yet. And I think that the reason for that is both of these teams were just not able to put pressure on the QB. Now he was a lot more accurate in week one in week two than he was in week one, and that is definitely a good sign for Kyler. I was able to throw for 400 passing yards. Obviously, the game script helped that a bit as they were trailing at one point in that game and kept it close throughout. But I do think at some point we're going to see a lot of rushing attempts from Kyler, whether that be design, whether that be quarterback pressure. I don't expect Jacksonville to put much pressure on this offensive line, so maybe they roll out some schemes for him moving forward throughout the season. Obviously, his floor, it's a very small sample size, obviously, but the floor of at least 30 points, I think, is the most compelling argument here at 8,300. Now, moving down the list, you have Russ against the Minnesota Vikings in a pace-up game for both teams. Seattle's been involved in a shootout last week, and Minnesota's been involved in 2 shootouts. Can you consider Russ in tournaments this week? Because I don't think he's a cash game play.
Yeah, certainly not a cash game play, but someone that I think you can consider, especially when you look at he is going to be on the 4 p.m. slate. I guess the question for me comes down to, am I playing Wilson on the 4 p.m. slate, or am I playing Brady on the 4 p.m. slate? I think it is close between the both of them. Right now, because we've seen this Minnesota team in 2 straight games where it's been a lot of points, I think I'm slightly leaning towards Wilson.
Yeah, I think that you can probably get a little bit better correlation because the teams that Brady's involved with, the Rams and the Bucks, there's so many guys that can do so many different things. This seems like a little bit clearer path to targets, a little bit better target share amongst the guys that you can stack. Now there's 4 primary receivers, 5 if you count KJ Osborne, which I don't yet at this point. But you obviously have the big 2 in Seattle with Metcalf and Lockett, and then what did we call them? The mini Seattle in Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. It's going to turn into that kind of thing for the Minnesota Vikings. John Boy 101, thank you for the follow, sir. Hope you are enjoying the stream and this DraftKings first look. Let's move on here. Talk about before we move on from Brady, I do want to say that his floor, again, small sample size, and he's had 2 cupcake matchups but his floor is 30 DraftKings points as well. Do I think he gets there
Mm.
against LA? Probably not. It's probably a comeback down to earth spot for Tampa. Although I do think that that's probably one of the best games to watch on Sunday afternoon. We talked about this the other day, yesterday, and we don't necessarily have the 4 o'clock hammers like we used to see the last 2 weeks. But we do have this Tampa Bay game. We have this Seattle Minnesota game. I think the better DFS game right now, Josh, is the Seattle Minnesota one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I don't know. I think Brady's kind of matchup proof at this point. So I think even though that Rams defense might be tough, I still think that he can have a good game. I still probably being too contrarian with trying to go Tom Brady, and I'll probably end up with Russell Wilson, just like the rest of the industry will. The real question is when we get to the wide receiver range, and we can talk about this more, which one do you pair up? Because Lockett
Yeah,
has the second most yards out of any wide receiver this season, whereas DK seems kind of lost out there. So it's going to be interesting to talk about.
for sure. Let's move on down the list here, talking about guys 6,500 and under on DraftKings for quarterback. You have Herbert coming off what I thought was a kind of a bust spot against Dallas. He goes up against Kansas City in what should be a pace-up game for the Chargers. Interesting spot there. Moving down the list, I highlighted Kirk Cousins yesterday on FanDuel. He's not in play for me on DraftKings this week. The quarterback position is just too loaded up top for me to consider really anybody in this price range. And this is where we start to get all the injured QBs, Josh. So I'm hesitant on saying this, and I don't want to come out and give a clear stance on this just yet. But what do we think about, we have to actually pick and choose our spots here, but do we think we can roll out maybe like an Easton Stick or a backup in a good spot this week rather than paying up at quarterback?
No, I don't think you can necessarily roll out a backup. I don't believe in any of those backups. Even the best backup out of the bunch, which is why am I blanking on who the best backup out of the bunch is? I've talked about him so many times.
Brissett.
Uh, yes, even Jacoby Brissett, who I think is a relatively good backup in the NFL, still isn't in play for me just because I don't think you need to go there. I think if you're going to a cheap quarterback, a guy that I really like is Daniel Jones at 5,900. He's shown us something in the first two games that we just haven't seen from him, and it's that he has this rushing upside. He had 9 attempts against Washington. He had 6 attempts against Denver. In both games, he had a rushing TD. In both games, he had a passing TD. In both games, we've seen him have over 30 attempts to throw the ball. And this is a much easier defense in Atlanta. So, not going to say it's a cupcake defense necessarily, but we've seen them get torched by Hurts. We've seen them get, I won't say torched. They didn't do that well against Tom Brady either. I think this could be a get right spot for Daniel Jones where he can finally bring his team to a win. So, I like the Daniel Jones price tag. I like the rushing upside that you get with him. And I think he's someone that you have to at least consider.
I like the price tag a lot. The matchup's great. Hopefully, Jason Garrett gets things together. Uh, we'll talk about we'll talk about that. We had a good conversation about that. Uh, Also, by the way, chat, we're having a new segment on Tuesdays called Jason Garrett Tuesdays. So that'll be always
Yep.
fun to recap what he did wrong the previous week. So yeah, for me, I think you're right. I think the lowest I would go would be that area. If Carson Wentz was good to go for some reason, I have some GPP interest in him. Although I do think that two sprained ankles. I don't know how you like you sprain one ankle and you go back out there and you sprain the other one. You're like, oh, I want to go back in. I'm good.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, all power to Carson Wentz, but he gets a fantastic spot. If he was actually healthy, I'd actually have interest in him at 5,700 against Tennessee. But outside of that, everybody else is in a tough matchup, or they just don't have enough upside. For DraftKings quarterbacks, guys, I know that there will be interest later in the week. I'm going to get questions. We're both going to get questions about rostering guys like Stick, guys like Chase Daniel, guys like Davis Mills, who I know is on Thursday night. But yeah, we're going to get questions about all that kind of stuff. For DraftKings, you need the upside of 25 to 30 DraftKings points, and not many quarterbacks can do that, especially guys who are coming in as rookies or their first NFL start. Usually they put up stat lines of like 250 and 1, 250 and 2, and that's not enough. That's only like 20, 22 DraftKings points. So to get to guys like Kyler Murray, guys like Lamar Jackson, Patty, even Tom Brady, they have the upside of 30 to 35, and you also saw Kyler get in that range of 40 DraftKings points. So that's going to make a huge difference, and I'd much rather pay up for quarterback. It's a little bit different because we used to, back in the day, for those of you who played DFS in the days of 2014, 15, 16, 17, or earlier, we were always trying to pay down at quarterback because the pricing for these guys and the quarterbacks that were in the league at the time weren't necessarily running the ball. They were more pocket passers or elite passers with good offenses. So now that the game's changed a little bit, DraftKings and FanDuel have made the updates to pricing. They've priced guys like Lamar, like Murray, like Josh Allen, even Russ to a certain extent up a little bit higher because they do carry that rushing floor, which is definitely something that I look for as a cash game player. Um, would we have time to get it all in? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, sir.
I think he's referring to the Jason Garrett section or
Oh, we
segment of the
definitely
show.
we will carve out time to get that segment in there.
We'll go long to get Jason to talk about Jason Garrett as much as we want. Jason Garrett seems to be a popular subject on our morning after show.
Kai says Matt Ryan or Kyler Murray, only two I'm looking at. You want to talk to Matt Ryan really quickly? He's kind of dead to me in DFS, but at 5,400 against the Giants, I can't say I hate the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this Giants team also kind of get torched too. We've seen Teddy Bridgewater look good, and more importantly, we saw Taylor Heineke look good. I mean, if Taylor Heineke's able to do it, Ryan should be able to do it. I like Ryan. I'm not gonna say I love the spot, but I understand it. It's I don't know. You have to pay an extra 400 to get up to Daniel Jones. Give me Daniel Jones over Matt Ryan because he has that rushing upside.
I definitely was rostering Ryan. I believe it was 2 seasons ago. He went on this ridiculous stretch of basically being a lock for 300 passing yards on DraftKings. So he was unplayable on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he was getting that 300-yard bonus every single week, it seemed like, for about 7 or 8 weeks straight. Now, he did have 46 pass attempts, 300 yards. So he got that bonus last week. He also threw 3 picks. So if he doesn't throw those picks, he's having a 25-point DraftKings point day. I can't necessarily say it's a bad play. It's definitely GPP. Could he throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns? Absolutely. And if he's throwing like I think he's going to throw with at least 35 to 40 times, yeah, I mean, I can't say I hate it. But again, I think I would side with Josh and say Daniel Jones is probably the better play at this range. All right. One last question about Kyler Murray. Is he the best play this week at QB? A little bit early to tell, but he has the best matchup on the board for sure.
Without
So,
a doubt. I
yeah.
definitely think he contends for that top QB spot. Not sure
Yeah,
if I can give it to him just yet.
it's he sticks out the most. That's probably the best answer we can give at this point.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to running back here, we have Derrick Henry sitting at the top at 8,600. This price tag is definitely different than FanDuel. I know that this is probably a little bit more doable to get to him, but is it a matchup that we really want to exploit? I don't know, and I would have to side with Dalvin Cook again uh, over Derrick Henry. I would have made that choice last week too, Josh. But obviously, people will see that 44, 40, whatever he got last week. He actually got 50 DraftKings points on DraftKings because of the 100-yard bonus and the PPR points. So they're going to look at that and say, "Oh man, I can get 50 points from this guy. Why don't I plug him in?" But Minnesota's playing that same exact Seattle team this week, and I think Dalvin Cook has pathways to 20 plus points.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dalvin Cook's the way to go. We know that the Seattle team has a weak D line. It's been talked about a ton in the past years, and it's no different this season. Dalvin Cook should be in a smash spot. So I like the Dalvin Cook play. I think that's the way you go instead of Derrick Henry. Now, we did talk about how Derrick Henry is starting to become a pass catcher a little bit. So
Yep.
maybe does that sway you one way since we are on a PPR site now?
It's definitely encouraging. Something I look for all the time. He's never. I think I saw a stat that he has never had his like season high in targets is 30, so he's already a third of the way there in 2 games. Now I do think that's been an emphasis for them because they've realized that every single time they make a deep playoff run, that they face an offense that they can't keep up with, and Derrick Henry can't win the game by himself. But he can be used in the passing game, and we've seen that he played very well. I will say it's probably I don't want to say too much of an overreaction because of that game and how insane it was back and forth down the stretch. Because he did have like I don't know 20 DraftKings points in between, well maybe even more, maybe 30 DraftKings points in between the second half and overtime, which is but bananas. But anyway, um, I think it's encouraging. I'm not going to go over the hill on this yet, but I still think that if you want to believe in this, I think it ups his stock more than it usually would. So yes, I do think that we're going to see more from this. Can we count on 6 targets a week? I don't think so right now, but I'm going to wait to see. And he's not out of cash game consideration. I just think I would target Dalvin Cook over him right now.
Yep, I tend to agree.
Okay, moving down the list. Um, Kamara, Chubb, Eckler, all in this 7K range. There's only 2 guys in the 7K range this week, which is very interesting. So moving down, I mean, I was encouraged by Austin Eckler's performance against Dallas. He came back in the passing game, got a lot of target share there, 9 targets, 9 receptions, very, very efficient. Didn't even get in the end zone and still scored 22 DraftKings points. Should get a lot of work against Kansas City. Kansas City's had a lot of issues with the opposing running backs they've faced so far in Baltimore and in Week 1 against the Browns. I think both of the Browns running backs went off in Week 1. So do you think Eckler has any merit here in this spot at 7,200?
Yeah, I think that Eckler at least does have some merit. Not sure I'm in love with the play necessarily, but I think it's a guy that could come into play, especially when you're looking at that game log. He didn't have a touchdown last week, but at least we saw him get back into the target game, right? Like our big thing last week was like, don't overreact to Eckler quite yet. He will get those catches. He certainly did get those catches last week. Had 9 targets, had 9 receptions, had 61 yards. And you see how much of a difference it makes once he gets those targets
Yep.
because compared to week 1, where he got that touchdown, he doubled his score, or almost doubled his score, compared to week 1, just because he had 9 receptions. So Eckler didn't get in the end zone. Think he could get in the end zone this week, and if that's the case, then and he's going to have 9 targets, he's certainly in play. And it's gonna have to be a shootout with this KC team, right? Like they're gonna score a lot. The Chargers are gonna be forced to score a lot. Means that Eckler is just gonna be more involved in that passing game.
Yep. Huge pace up for the Chargers. They're going to have to pass a lot as they'll be either down or competing heavily with the Chiefs, like you said. I don't mind it. And again, we like to target this exact kind of running back on DraftKings specifically. So moving down the list, we do have Taylor, 67 against Tennessee. I think that price tag is way too cheap, personally. Then you have Najee Harris at 66, Saquon at 65. Saquon definitely a little bit more priced up in terms of where he's at on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. Any interest in one of these guys in the mid 6Ks?
Yeah, I'm surprised you say that Taylor's priced up. I mean, he's running back
No,
6
no,
over, or
he's
he's price.
definitely not.
No, he's at a.
Yeah.
You said he's at a good price tag. Sorry, that's what I meant. You said he's at a good price tag here, but he's at an even better price tag over on FanDuel. Then
Yep.
over on FanDuel, he is running back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and here he's running back 6. So you get a little bit more of a discount positionally wise on FanDuel. I certainly don't mind the play. I think it is a good spot to get Jonathan Taylor in. I will say Saquon Barkley completely priced out of my range. I love the price
Yep.
tag over on FanDuel. We talked about that a lot yesterday, but this price tag on DraftKings might just be a little bit too much for me. So I can get behind Jonathan Taylor. Not going to get behind Saquon. And Najee also priced up. Probably not getting behind Harris either.
Right. I agree with you. So for me, if we're taking, we're going to go position by position here, obviously, but if you have interest in Kyler Murray and you have interest in these top running backs, there's obviously got to be guys down here where you have a little bit more interest in a little bit. So David Montgomery against Cleveland, 6,100. Not the best matchup on paper, but he might be relied on more with Justin Fields in the mix. You also have guys like Gibson against Buffalo, DeAndre Swift, who we saw against Baltimore. Now, these Baltimore running backs start to come into play a little bit. Tyson Williams, 5,800. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Running back's a little bit tougher this week than it was in previous weeks. I think Chase Edmonds is going to garner some ownership here, 5,700. I don't blame people for going that. If they want, again, like I wouldn't recommend going Kyler Chase Edmonds, but I feel like people will go back to that well, like they did last week.
Yeah, I like some of these guys in this lower range. I mean, the range that you just talked about, I do really like Antonio Gibson this week. I think it's only a matter of time before he gets that touchdown, and he is seeing a good amount of yards for what we need from him. So I like the Gibson play a lot down here. I also think DeAndre Swift is potentially another guy that I like that is in play. If he keeps getting those targets, we saw 11 in week 1. We only saw 5 yesterday, but if we see more targets for him, then he's kind of similar to the Eckler role, right? Where he's a guy who might not have a ton of rushing attempts because he's splitting that role with Jamal Williams, but if he gets those targets, then he'll make his value. And then one other guy, Chase Edmonds. I know I said I like Kyler, but if you don't want to go Kyler and go Lamar, I think filling in Chase Edmonds is a good way to go because he is getting a ton of targets. We saw 4 in week 1, we saw 5 in week 2. We're seeing him get not all of the rushing attempts, but a good chunk of them. Good enough chunk that he's going to pay off this price tag of 5,700 against the worst defense. I can't say in the NFL, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So I like this range. I think this is range is the reason why you potentially can roster a Kyler or a Lamar Jackson with Dalvin Cook, and then go down to this range and feel good about it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to have to make some running back decisions down in this range. So I'm not, um, I'm just not sure who it's going to be just yet for me. Again, I come
Yeah.
back to Baltimore. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up going there, but it's, you know, I know that Tyson Williams looked good in the first 2 games. A little bit more of a disappointment in the second game, and he obviously lost a fumble. But 15 touches for this price tag with a heavy Baltimore run team is certainly something I can get behind a little bit. Moving down the list, again, not much here. Um, keep an eye on Josh Jacobs as Kenyon Drake is, he's appropriately priced at 5,500. They were using him more as that chase of pace. Wow, I can't talk today. A change of pace back and giving him a lot of targets out of the backfield. Um, I think people might gravitate towards a Miles Gaskin against Vegas. That sounds like a terrible idea to me.
Ew.
But yeah, moving down the list, I mean, any interest in Mike Davis? I know that Cordell Patterson took a lot of the work last week, but somebody's going to go off against the Giants here.
Yeah, I think that Mike Davis is definitely in play, especially if he sees that same workload of passes that he got in week 2, where he saw 7 targets. Mike Davis at 5,100 feels a little bit like a misprice. So I like Mike Davis here. Don't know if I'd go to anyone else because this range gets really ugly. I mean, like you said, we have Gaskin in this range, which is I cannot imagine playing Miles Gaskin in DFS this season unless you see multiple injuries. One thing that I do want to bring up is this Buffalo team because we have Singletary at 4,900, we have Zach Moss at 4,700. I want to get your thoughts. Both guys scored a touchdown in week 2. Do you think either one of them are value plays this week?
I think that that had a lot to do with the atrocious Miami defensive line, as well as the fact that they didn't have to pass the ball anymore. Against Washington, I think that Buffalo's going to have a tougher time trying to get things done on the ground. And we saw, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to box score Chase Singletary, but I know that he had a really long touchdown. Yeah, he had a 46-yard touchdown, which if you take away that, that would only be 12 carries for 38 yards. So that's definitely discouraging for me. I know he scored the touchdown. He also has fumbled 3 times this season too. So I don't know how much in the doghouse he is, but it's interesting. It's gross, obviously, but again, we're talking about guys. I think that you need to roster an RB2 or a flex play in this price range of 45 to 55. I think one of those guys is going to be up in play this week. So I can't rule out the Buffalo backs. It's just pretty gross for me. Um, I think people, Josh, I think people are going to play either, well, they're not probably going to play Sonny Michel because we'll have to see what happens with Daryl Henderson this week. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is sitting at $4,800 against the Chargers. Do you feel like this is a spot where people will flock to?
I feel like it's a spot that people are going to love this week. I think that everyone gets behind this spot, and I think it's potentially I don't know how you feel about it, so I won't speak for you. I think it's potentially one of the reasons that I win this week on this 1 p.m. slate because I think Clyde's kind of a donkey play. Honestly, it feels like a chalk donkey play. It looks like a chalk donkey play. Every game that I've watched him in, just not impressive from a speed aspect, from getting to the corners to everything that I've seen from him running wise is not something that's encouraging me. Not only that, but this Kansas City Chiefs team, they ran the ball 16 times on Sunday in a game that they were leading for a majority of the game. Why would you run the ball 16 times? It's because their new OC probably wants to let Patrick Mahomes sling the ball. probably wants to let the best quarterback in all of football do his thing. And that's what they usually do in September. They usually try to gear things towards Mahomes. That's why Mahomes' record in September is now, wow, actually, he was defeated in September. And I guess
Yep,
that
he was.
this Sunday was the first loss that he's ever had. So he's 11-1 in September now, but he's averaging 3 touchdowns a game. He's averaging 300 yards a game. He's been an absolute beast in September. So I think they try to keep the ball in his hands throughout September games. I think this is no different against the Chargers. I don't think you're going to see a lot of runs for CEH. And honestly, like if we don't see something from CEH soon, I don't know. I'm probably overreacting a little bit. I just don't know how long they're going to let CEH keep getting opportunities when he really hasn't done much for this team overall.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your points. I think that early on they're going to pass the ball. As this season goes on, I do think we see more of the running game as things get colder. Kansas City actually is one of the coldest places to play in the league when they play at home. But I did want to mention that we did see actually he got no work in the backfield as far as the passing game goes, but we did see one target for Jerick McKinnon. I thought that he was a little bit more involved in that, but we also saw that Darrell Williams did get that goal line touchdown. So again, furthering our point that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just not their goal line back. They're going to give it to the bigger body in Darrell Williams. Even Jerick McKinnon probably is a better size play for that personnel group at the goal line. So Edwards-Helaire, he's getting less than 15 touches in both weeks. No work in the passing game, which is really sad because this passing offense is elite. So if he was involved in it, he'd be pretty good for DFS. But he's just not getting there. And I think that people are going to play this guy this week, and I think it's a massive mistake. I'd much rather go with Mahomes and a pass catcher option. So anything else down here in this running back range, or else we're just going to move on.
No, it gets really ugly.
It does.
I liked Naeem Hines last week. It's now seeing that Marlon Mack is going to be involved in that backfield. Got 5 carries in week 2 and ended up also having a target. So takes away a little bit of that Hines upside. And outside of that, I mean, you're just looking at a whole bunch of ugly stuff once you get down to this range. Probably
Yep.
nothing in play. And we can just move on to talk about some wide receivers.
All right, let's do it. Wide receiver group up top is Tyreek Hill, 8,400. DeAndre Hopkins, 8,200. Those are the only guys above 8K. Then you have Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jefferson, Ridley, McLaurin, Cooper Kupp, Adam Thielen, rounding out the top 15. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like Hopkins is probably one of the most popular tournament plays on the board here. Do people really get scared away from the second rank opponent ranking for the LA Chargers? I'm not too sure. Probably not. But I think that people are going to prioritize Kelsey over Hill this week. So where do you see this top range of wide receivers going from 7K to 8,400?
Yeah, if I'm picking one guy that I really like in this spot, it's probably going to be one of the Seattle guys, and I feel pretty firm in saying that it's going to be Tyler Lockett for me. Um, I like this range, but I'm not sure if I can get behind Hopkins necessarily. They're just involving a lot of pass catchers in that system. So to pay a high price tag for a guy who might not even get over 5 targets is a little bit scary. Rondale Moore really proven himself. AJ Green even looked good on Sunday. And then you have Chase Edmonds out of the backfield. You have a guy in Max Williams who ended up getting 7 targets last week. Like there's just a lot of guys that they like to involve in that Cardinal system. So not sure if I'm going to be willing to pay top dollar for Hopkins for right now. But I do really like Tyler Lockett. I like this spot for Diggs, possibly. I think Tyreek Hill is always in play. But if I had to choose uh, one above 7,300, it'd probably be Lockett for me.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I think I would side with Lockett as well. You can always get Hopkins exposure through Kyler Murray, so I don't mind the fade. 4 targets last week was definitely discouraging in one of their most exciting games of the year. Obviously, they've only had 2, but they're not going to, I mean, maybe they shoot out every week. This week doesn't seem like one. And especially if he doesn't get one early and they establish a lead, how many times are they going to throw the ball? So that's kind of my concern there. Uh, but yeah, the rest of this, I mean, the one that sticks out to me outside of this game stack, because I think this game stack is going to be popular this weekend between Seattle and Minnesota, would be Calvin Ridley. I'm hopping back on the train this week. Was very encouraged to see 10 targets from him last week. I'll let you take your victory lap on this one. But he did have 10 targets, which was good. Atlanta has shown that they're going to be trailing for the majority of their games, and now they're on the road against New York. A little bit sloppier of a game, I think, but at the end of the day, I do think that they don't have anybody that can cover him. We saw what Terry McLaurin was able to do against this Giants secondary. Calvin Ridley, equal talent. I think he's able to make things happen against the Giants.
Yeah, I can't even necessarily take my victory lap because the guy only got 19 DraftKings points, and 19 DraftKings points is okay, but at 7,500, that's not necessarily winning a tournament. So I'll take a slight little victory lap, a tiny little one, a nice little pat on the back here. But I do really like him this week. This 7K price tag feels wrong. It feels dirty. The fact that he's wide receiver 3 over on FanDuel and wide receiver 7 over on DraftKings is a mistake. I love this price tag. One thing I am concerned about is that he will see Bradbury defense for a majority of this game. And Bradbury defense, very good defense. One of the better corners in the league. So that scares me at least a little bit. But I still think that he's going to get a majority of the targets here. And I really do like him in this spot.
Okay, let's move on down the list here. Terry McLaurin, tough matchup against Buffalo. Cooper Kupp gets a spot where, again, I don't think this opponent ranking is necessarily right for Tampa, although they have allowed a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. So you have Cooper Kupp, he's a much higher price tag on FanDuel than he is DraftKings, so you're getting a little bit of value and savings on this site here. You also have Adam Thielen, who we already talked about in the Seattle game, who's in a good spot, back-to-back weeks with touchdowns. And now you're going down the list here a little bit more. Both Tennessee receivers are here, Josh, at 6,500. This feels like not a home run spot necessarily, but it definitely feels like something that we could take advantage of.
It's funny that on FanDuel they have both of these guys priced similar. You have AJ Brown at 6,800, and you have Julio Jones at 6,700. And on DraftKings, you kind of have the same thing where both of these guys are actually at 6,500. So it's interesting to see them here. I agree there is an advantage to be taken. I'd like to look deeper into what cornerbacks are they going to line up against, who gets the better matchup overall. That's gonna have to be something like we've said. This is the first look show. I haven't even got close to that part of my deep dive. But when I do, I'll make sure to report back and tell you guys who I like the most, or it'll be included in my article somewhere, I'm sure. But both of these guys are in play, and whichever one gets the better matchup, I could definitely see making a GPP lineup and possibly maybe the 1 p.m. only lineup.
Yep, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both in this range as well on the opposite sides of these Tennessee receivers. Keenan Allen seems like a spot where he's too cheap. Mike Williams seems like a spot where he's too expensive, but he has put in the work and the workload is shown. Double-digit targets in back-to-back games, touchdowns in back-to-back games, 22 DraftKings points in back-to-back games. So, like I said yesterday, Mike Williams' regression season is coming. It is now here. I think that we can count for like a shootout type scenario anytime these the Chargers take the field against their opponents. And I think that you can load up on one of these guys against Kansas City. I think Keenan Allen's a fantastic value play this week yet again. I'm not worried about what happened last week. He still got the 100-yard bonus. He had 8 targets, 4 receptions, so not as efficient as I would like, but he can still give you 20 DraftKings points on a week-to-week basis. So I'm not too worried about the spot here for Keenan Allen. Let's move down the list a little bit farther. We talked about how these Tampa Bay Bucks receivers fell through the floor in terms of pricing. We have the most expensive one, Mike Evans at 63, Chris Godwin at 61, and I don't even see Antonio Brown. So I'm going to keep scrolling.
5,200.
That's actually I can't believe that's a thing. So yeah, talk to me about the Bucks wide receivers and what you like this week against the Rams.
Yeah, I already talked about it yesterday. How I think it's just going to be a carousel of these wide receivers. Tom Brady he has to keep his guys happy. That's why you kind of saw Evans focused last week. I should have picked up on that earlier. I thought about it as I was watching the game, and I was like, gosh, like how did I not think about this? This is a very easy take to have and he just wasn't able to get there last week. So definitely going to be there now. And if he's going to keep his guys happy, then I would assume that the guy who got the least amount of work would be the guy that he tries to force the ball to. That would be Antonio Brown. And it makes sense, right? Because Antonio Brown's probably the guy who's going to see the least amount of coverage from that Rams team.
Yep.
I really like Antonio Brown this week, and I liked him on FanDuel yesterday. It was a moderate, like it was an okay play, but on DraftKings where he's 5,200, like just a clear misprice for me. I'm gonna. I really like this spot for him. He's probably a lock and load on the 4 p.m. slate.
Yeah, I think that all these guys are undervalued. I understand that they priced them down for DraftKings because of the matchup against the Rams, but I do think that Tampa Bay's offense is one that can produce fantasy outputs for guys no matter what matchup they're in. Let's move up the list a little bit because we did skip over a few guys, and I don't want to get too in depth on these, so let's just make it, pick one guy that you want to talk about in this range, and then we'll dumpster dive. So I will
Yeah,
just start out and go. Sorry, I'll start out and
no,
go
go for it,
with.
man.
I think that you can look or take a look at Michael Pittman Jr. Last week, much better than week one. 12 targets against the Rams, which again, tough matchup there, but we've seen that the Rams are able to give up a little bit to opposing wide receivers. He did have a long catch of 42, which brought him over the 100-yard bonus, but again, 5,500, great spot going up against Tennessee. The biggest concern that I have is who's the quarterback that's throwing him the ball. So Pittman would be in play for me in tournaments, maybe a cash game play as long as Carson Wentz is in there.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely get behind it. Guy that I would focus on. I don't know what range are we talking about here. Is it just 6K and below, or 5,500 and below, or?
Yeah, 6K and below is fine. We can dumpster dive under 4K here in a bit.
Sweet. So 6K and below kind of works out perfectly because my guy is exactly at 6K. Really like Cortland Sutton. Really like what I saw from him against that Jaguars defense. Saw 12 targets, 9 receptions. Seemed like the old Cortland Sutton almost. He had 159 yards. He had that long bomb of 55 yards, but even if you take that out, he still had 104 yards. Still gets that 100-yard bonus. Not sure if you can expect to see 12 targets for him this week, but even if you see 8 to 10 targets for him, he probably surpasses value at 6K. So I really like Cortland Sutton. Also, another guy, I don't want to go too deep into this range, but another guy that I do like here, just under him, Sterling Shepard.
Yep.
Been getting a ton of targets this year, 19 targets as a whole, has had over 15 DraftKings points in both of his games just because he is being this PPR animal and should continue to be a PPR animal, especially against Atlanta. Just not a very good defense that I respect. So I like Sterling Shepard, especially if you take him and pair him with Daniel Jones. I think that's
Yep.
good correlation.
They're the exact same price. I love it. I think you can run it back with Ridley. It sounds gross on paper, guys, but these guys are they're DraftKings points beasts. So Sterling
Yeah.
Shepard, almost double-digit back-to-back weeks targets wise. He missed the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings by 6 yards. So I think he's firmly in play, and I think that he should be in line for a big day against Atlanta. So I love the play there. Let's dumpster dive here. Let's move down in this below 5K range. Obviously, there'll be guys that we'll cover on the podcast as well as other streams, but I want to get down here and talk about a guy named Rondale Moore sitting at 5K. You saw a breakout season was coming for Rondale Moore, and it's here now. 8 targets, 7 receptions last week, 114 yards. I know that a lot of it came on that long touchdown, but this is the guy. This is a guy that can do that boom bust thing. I think he'll become more consistent as the year goes on, as he evolves into that what I believe to be a wide receiver 2 role that he's going to carve out for himself. I don't think I can get behind it in cash games because again, I think Sterling Shepard's a better play. I think Cortland Sutton's a better play. But this is a fantastic matchup if you want to fade DeAndre Hopkins and stack Rondale Moore with Kyler Murray, Josh.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like we brought up this stat yesterday, and I'll bring it up again just for those who weren't a part of the stream yesterday. In week one, Rondale Moore ran 14 routes on 36 Kyler dropbacks. In week two, he got up to 24 routes on 41 dropbacks. So if he's progressively going up, how many routes is he going to get on dropbacks this week? Maybe he gets that 75% mark. And if that's the case, then the guy's going to be an animal at this 5K price tag. So I like this play. I agree with you. Probably more GPP-ish, but something that you need to pay attention to for sure.
Definitely. Okay, moving down the list. I know that Jacoby Myers is here. Tim Patrick's here. You have a matchup for Zach Pascal against Tennessee, who I also think's in play. Looked good last week in that matchup against the Rams too. Didn't get as many targets as I thought or would like, but he's definitely still getting used to the system. Has 3 touchdowns in 2 games, so I think he's one of Carson's more popular targets and reads. So Zach Pascal is certainly interesting. Again, need to make sure if Carson's actually in there and how active he actually is. Um, and then moving down the list, I mean, dumpster diving down here seems pretty gross this week, Josh, because we don't have much news yet. But the one thing that I do want to bring up, Baker Mayfield has to play in order for us to do this. But these Cleveland receivers with no Jarvis Landry or Odell Beckham, you got Rashard Higgins is the top priced guy at 42, Anthony Schwartz, Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's pretty much the three that I'm looking at. So massive value for these guys on DraftKings this week. I think that we're going to end up punting one of these dudes this come Sunday.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see us punt one of these dudes. I will say, you missed one of my favorite value plays. Talked about him yesterday. Going to talk about him again here. 4,900 for Marvin Jones Jr. Has 20 targets throughout the season. He has 20 targets, and I think he's one of like the 10 wide receivers to have 20 targets. Plus, he has a touchdown in both weeks. It kind of just makes me scratch my head. Like, why is he at this price tag? Especially against an Arizona team that has been in 2 shootouts so far and could continue to be in shootouts with this Jaguars team if the Jags decide to throw the ball. So I like Marvin Jones here. I think under 5K is just way too cheap. This is a guy who could potentially be at that 6K range.
Yeah, I'm getting some. I'm getting a call in my ear saying that I should say that I like Marvin Jones from Kai. So I think it's so, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I have a hatred for Marvin Jones dating back to his Lions days and never holding up fantasy value. He's shown through 2 weeks. I don't know if this is going to carry all season, but he's shown to be one of the most reliable pieces on this team. Jacksonville obviously going to be down all the time and forced to throw. And it doesn't matter if Lawrence does poorly. We saw that he did poorly last week. The only touchdown that he got was to Marvin Jones. So 17.5 DraftKings points last week, 18.7 the week before. Yeah, I think he's certainly in play until we see more from DJ Chark. It's also worth noting James O'Shaughnessy is hurt. So, and they don't really have running backs that they can dump the ball off to. And if like they do, but they don't use them for some reason. So Marvin Jones is a guy that I can get behind in this range. The last guy that I want to touch on for wide receiver, and then we can move on, would be the guy that's on this Minnesota squad. It is none other than KJ Osborne at 3,500, a guy that we looked at last week and targeted against that matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Started the game off with that 64-yard touchdown bomb. He's not going to get you, like, I don't want to rely necessarily. I don't think the 9 targets thing is a real thing. I think that we're going to see down the road here as Minnesota is in these shootout scenarios that they're going to be in the range of 4 to 6 targets for KJ Osborne. He's certainly in play at 3,500. We now know that he has the big play upside. We also know that teams are going to concentrate on Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So I think that you can make a flyer for KJ. I don't think he's cash game viable necessarily, but obviously 20 points and 14 points in weeks 2 and 1 say otherwise.
Yep, definitely. I agree with you on the KJ Osborne take and someone to look for in that value range for sure.
Yeah, it's just one of those, like, somebody's got to step up in Minnesota here. BC Johnson's on the IR, Chad Beebe's on the IR. Smith Marsette's a rookie and he hasn't touched the field. And then DD Westbrook kind of seems washed up at this point. So I think the third wide receiver that they've been looking for in place of Irv Smith is KJ Osborne. He's actually not close in size to Irv Smith, but he's bigger and taller and more athletic than normal NFL wide receiver 3 sets. So for me, I think that he's certainly in play here. And then hopefully people were able to take advantage of that spot last week in week 2. So anything else here, or do you want to move on to tight end?
Let's move on to tight end.
Let's do it. Tight end, we obviously have Travis Kelce. Like I stuttered there as I said that. Travis Kelce, 8,200. Want to just quickly swap back to Tyreek Hill, who was 8,400. Now, we saw Kelce, who has been a beast in both games. Tyreek was kind of lost in the last game. Kelce, 25 points in back-to-back weeks. 8 targets week 2, 7 targets week 1, 3 touchdowns to start off the season through 2 weeks. This kind of feels like, so it's different in the fact that Darren Waller was by himself in week 2, and then there was a gap of like 3 or 4 thousand, and you had the rest of the tight ends. How are we approaching tight end early this week? It kind of feels like I'm seeing Kyle Pitts down there. I'm seeing T.J. Hawkinson down there a little bit. Do you feel like you have to jam in Travis Kelce?
I don't think you need to jam in Travis Kelsey, but I do think you need to have one of Kelsey or Hill. And Kelsey's definitely the safer option out of the two. So I like the Kelsey play, but I like Hawkinson too. We've seen double digit targets, or we saw double digit targets last night. He looked really good, had 8 receptions, had a touchdown. He's had a touchdown in both games as well. So I like that price tag of 5,200. And then you kind of get an ugly for the deeper and deeper you get on this slate. Tight end has been kind of disgusting when it comes to value plays, right?
Value plays we normally were able to get some early on in the season, and as the year goes on, haven't really had that so far. We've seen the top guys smash and go off outside of Darren Waller in week 2. But yeah, I mean, for me, like honestly, Kelsey's in play. Darren Waller's in play against a really, really bad Miami defense. Uh, and obviously, we'll have to note the injury to Josh Jacobs, as that will play into more of what Waller's going to do. Gronk going up against the Rams, first tough matchup for him all season, so I'm off that play. TJ Hawkinson, tough matchup again, but I will say that the tight ends against Baltimore, whoever lines up against Patrick Queen has dominated him through the first 2 weeks. Now, I say that, but he's also played. He's Patrick Queen has also faced off against Kelsey and Waller, so it's kind of a tough thing to actually compare itself to. But T.J. Hawkinson looked very good last night, and I do think that he will be able to handle Patrick Queen as well. So I don't mind that play at 5,200.
For sure.
Okay, moving down the list, Kyle Pitts against the Giants. I like that play. I know that we were off Kyle Pitts after a week 1 performance that disappointed everybody. He's getting used to the role in the league. I mean, I can't say he looks bad through 2 games. Like we can't really make that argument. Was he a little lost in week 1? Sure, but I kind of expected that a little bit. So week 2 against Tampa, I know that he will be in a spot where he's never lining up on the line. He's always going to be lined up outside. So I don't mind Kyle Pitts against the Giants in a spot where maybe we see Calvin Ridley get shut down and Pitts becomes the target monster. Who knows? So I like that quite a bit. Noah Fant against the Jets. We saw how active he was last week. I was hoping he would get a little bit more target work, but he did get the touchdown when it mattered. So all said and done, Fant has not been a disappointment this year whatsoever. Down the list, this is where it starts to get gross, right? Like we thought that
Yeah.
Jared Cook was a good play last week. Maybe you can include him in some tournaments this week. I don't think Evan Ingram's going to play against Atlanta, so it just gets gross and grosser as it goes down the list here. I can't really find anything I like. I know you touched on Max Williams. Do you want to touch on him here? That would be the only guy I would look at.
Yeah, that's exactly the only guy that I would look at below those main guys that we talked about. 3,200, not even like a great price or anything. Like you're not even getting a humongous discount on him, like we saw with O'Shaughnessy last week, where he was at 2,700. I like those guys under 3K, but this guy at 3.2, it's very boom or bust. He could either go out there and catch every reception he gets and end up dominating his value, or we could see what we saw week 1, where he only got one target and he was just not included in the game. I will say we did just get some breaking news that there's a fire in the Superdome, in the New Orleans Superdome. So hope everyone's okay. Sending well wishes out. I don't know what the fire is in regards to, but there is steam or there's smoke and flames that are coming from the roof of the Saints home stadium. So hope
Interesting.
everyone's okay there.
Yeah, I don't think that they were even cleared to return to the stadium too. So hopefully it's just something that they're working on, and hopefully nobody's actually in the building. I don't think that they have been cleared to play, and I know that they've been on the road for a while anyway. But again, yeah, best wishes to all of them. Yeah, they're on the road this week against New England, so hopefully they're not practicing there. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on here and talk about defense. Now, I never really like to pay up at defense. Some of those plays paid off last week. The Patriots being one, the Buccaneers being another. Now we have the Broncos taking on the New York Jets in a spot where Zach Wilson threw 4 picks. We forgot to mention yesterday that Zach Wilson is going to go to Denver, play at Mile High, and play this ferocious Denver defense. So how do you think that's going to work out for him?
Probably not very well. I mean, we saw the guy throw 4 picks last week. We also saw this Denver team pick off Trevor Lawrence a few times last week. Not going to look pretty. So I know we don't try to pay up for offenses or for defenses that much, but it almost feels like a spot where you can pay up for this Broncos defense and feel good about it in GPPs because of their upside.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Steelers against Joe Burrow at Cincinnati. That sounds terrible for the Bengals. Down the list here, nothing really sticks out. I guess Ravens does a little bit. 3,600 is a lot though. Down the list even more. I think you can target Vegas against Miami if Tua is out. I think you can target him if Tua is in, because Tua is definitely not going to be healthy no matter what. He's not going to be 100% no matter what the outcome is. So I don't mind Vegas at 34. And then we'll have to see what happens with the quarterback scenarios, but either defense in the Browns or Bears game is in play too. Basically, any defense that's going to go up against the opposing team's backup QB. I want to find, oh, here it is. Here's the juice right here. Tennessee Titans 2,400 against a possible Easton Stick first NFL game. That would be very
Yep.
interesting to see. I'd probably take that as my top overall defense if Carson Wentz is out.
Definitely. Don't mind that whatsoever. Same goes for the Bengals at 2,100 if we find out that Big Ben is going to have to sit out with this injury that we learned about today.
Yep, agreed. Literally so many injuries for the Steelers right now. Add Big Ben to the list. Yep, and Deontay is beat up a little bit, but he should be good to go. Yeah, Kai says thoughts on Njoku at 3,500 if OBJ is out. I'm already kind of already putting it out there that OBJ is going to sit this week. So I think that Njoku is in play as well as some of those other tight ends on Cleveland. It all depends on who's quarterback, right? So I don't feel as comfortable if Chase Daniel is in there. It's going to be really, really rough to watch, but I still think that anybody under 4K in that wide receiver room is going to be in play. But I would assume that with the Baker Mayfield injury, even if Baker starts, they could implore that they run the ball a lot this week. So Nick Chubb could actually be a sneaky tournament option where everybody's going to go with these cheap wide receivers.
For sure.
All right. Do we want to build a quick two minds, just like 6 or 7 pieces of this, and then we can get out of here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Chat, give us 2 stack options. One of them we're going to do a quarterback stack with the bring back, and then we'll do a mini stack of skill players. So we'll take the first 2 game stack options and run from there. All right. First one
Let's
came
do
in.
it.
Yeah, the first one
I'm
came
happy
in.
because that's the one I wanted to do.
Yeah, me too. That one's actually, it's probably going to gain some steam, but right now that feels like it's a little bit underrated.
Yeah, I agree.
So Atlanta, New York Jets, or New York Giants, excuse me, and we'll take whatever one comes next, or else Josh will decide for you.
Heck yeah.
All right, Josh is just going to decide for you because you
All
guys are
right.
too slow.
Yeah, come on, guys. Got to pick up the pace a little bit. Let's do Seattle and Minnesota. Oh, look, Teddy Two Stats said Seattle and Minnesota too, so it worked out literally perfectly.
Good timing. Good timing. Okay, so for the mini stack's going to be Seattle, Minnesota. We'll make the other one. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do, I'll go ahead and set Josh up with the absolute alley-oop and go Sterling Shepard.
Beautiful. I'm gonna go QB and take Daniel Jones.
Yeah, you can tell Josh and I have been working together for a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Only a little while.
I'm going to go and make things a little bit different here, and we'll take Kyle Pitts for the run back.
I like it. I like that a lot, actually. That is definitely a way to get different because people who correlate this would probably just automatically take Calvin Ridley and call it a day. But Pitts is a good option, especially at a weak tight end position. All right, let's get our Seattle in mini stack in. I am going to go to Tyler Lockett at wide receiver.
Sweet. I thought you were going to do that, so I'm glad because that's why I faded Calvin Ridley. Now we're going to go to Dalvin Cook at running back.
Beautiful. Take Dalvin Cook. Awesome. So we have 4 more spots to fill in.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one more guy, and you have that option to take that person, and then we got to leave the rest of it open.
All right. Let's take got to give you guys a little bit of salary savings. So I'm going to do something that'll make Jared's blood boil a little bit. Let's take Marvin Jones Jr. as our third wide receiver.
All righty. Good. He's very cheap on DraftKings. I'll give him that. Okay.
He's cheap everywhere, man. He's cheap on FanDuel too. Hold on, I have FanDuel in front of me. Oh, never mind. He's not that cheap. I thought he was way cheaper. He's at 6,300 over on DraftKings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a stay away spot on DraftKings.
Okay, so
yeah, to give you guys an idea, Sterling Shepard is the same price tag as Jones on FanDuel, and they're separated by 1,000 on DK.
Yeah, give me Shepard all day on FanDuel. So with that being said, guys, above us here we have a pretty good blueprint for you for tournaments this week as a first look. Got Daniel Jones going up against the Atlanta Falcons with Shepard as his pairing, then bringing it back with Kyle Pitts, who's very cheap this week at 4,900. Good pivot off of Calvin Ridley. Another good pivot off of Ridley is this mini stack with Lockett for Seattle against Dalvin Cook, what I expect to be one of the fastest paced games, if not a game that could go to overtime. Minnesota has been to overtime once this season, so has Seattle. Just feels like a spot where that game's going to blow up and everybody is. I think that people will gain steam on it eventually, but I like that game a lot now. And then finally, Marvin Jones is there as the third wide receiver. I'm glad we avoided the Browns, but you can still certainly go there on this in your flex spot. Running back, you should have no problem picking up a 6 or 7K guy, and then you can punt the defense. So should be able to build some awesome tournament lineups from this. I'll probably do a lot myself, but let's finish things off because we have an NFL voucher or FanDuel voucher to give away, as well as announce the Week 2 pick'em results for last week.